Welcome to the Chasing Rescue podcast. I'm Tanya McBain.
And I'm Dr. Michelle Rich, and this is where you're going to remember your voice, reclaim your life, and find your purpose.
Let's get into it. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about boundaries and why they're so difficult to set. And we're going to talk about why it's so worth it. So,
Yes, boundaries. So many people hear that word and they get instantly terrified, right?
it's just, yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember when you first started to set boundaries?
That was horrible.
Terrifying, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not, and especially women in our culture here in America, we're taught to be gracious. We're taught to, just kind of go along with the flow. Don't upset anybody, right? Just be polite, that kind of thing. And so when we hear the word boundaries, it can sound very overwhelming and very mean, right? What do you define as a boundary? Like,
Setting a limit and sticking to it.
I like that. What are some limits that you feel like are important?
For me, one of them is time access. That's a good boundary for me. I limit access to people who are toxic or not healthy for me. But I think the hardest thing for me to learn was no is a complete sentence. You don't have to over-explain or justify your reason, or you don't have to make up a little white lie. I can't come to dinner because this. You can just say, no, I'm unavailable.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And I feel like the over-explaining thing is so prevalent because especially in a narcissistic abuse situation, you've been taught that, and you've been conditioned that you don't get to ask for anything. But if you do, you better have a significant reason behind why.
You better justify
it. And so we're conditioned to feel like, okay, I have to, if I want to say this, I have to have all of this evidence behind it to support it. But like you said, no is a complete sentence, right? And so if you're here listening and learning about boundaries, here's your permission to not have to explain yourself and your needs to anybody. I work with my clients all the time on that, where it's like you have permission to just say no, even if there's no reason behind it. If it's just, I don't want to, that's fine, right? No is a complete sentence, and boundaries are just the way to really start to become okay with.
Why do you think so many people they feel guilty when they set a boundary?
I think it could be because of how they were raised, right? It could be if you live grow up in a family culture where yes is the only acceptable answer. If you have availability to help someone, if you come from a helping culture, which helping is not bad, right? We're not at all with setting boundaries, saying don't help people. But if you grow up in a culture where if you're available, you should say yes. I think a lot of it is just the guilt is kind of conditioned into us, that we're taught either growing up or in a current relationship that having needs is selfish, and having needs is human.
Yes, and I think as women, we give away too many pieces of ourselves, and because we feel guilty for not saying yes, we feel guilty for not helping, or we're used to overextending ourselves. Mm-hmm. So setting boundaries is something that I had to relearn when I was coming out of narcissistic abuse. And I was very uncomfortable when I started setting boundaries. And I did make some mistakes because I would set a boundary and then I would let the boundary get moved. And then you realize, the narcissist is going to buck up against these boundaries over and over again.
And I think that brings up a really good point, because when you set boundaries, one mindset to really focus on is boundaries are not set to punish someone. Boundaries are meant to protect you, right? And to set the expectation of when you do set a boundary, yes, the narcissist is going to be upset about it, right? Because they have been taking advantage of no boundaries. Again, picture them like a bully on the playground that just got taller. And they're going to grow up and they're going to, just expect the same to get their way. And if they stomp their feet and throw a fit, they expect to get their way. And when you stand firm on a boundary and they don't get their way, they don't have a frame of reference for how to handle their life, right? And we all know they don't have great emotional management, right? So they will throw a fit and they'll have a reaction, but that does not mean that you setting that boundary was wrong, right? Generally, if they do have a reaction, it means that that boundary was necessary, right?
Exactly. So as I got more comfortable setting boundaries, I would set more boundaries and then stick with my boundaries. It became easier. But I mean, the first boundary you set, you are a little apprehensive and a little scared, and it's just like, and then it becomes, after you do it over and over, it's easier and easier. And today, it's very easy for me to stick to a boundary. No means no.
Yes, because our brains like what's familiar and predictable. When you're first learning a new skill, whatever that skill is, and boundaries are no different, your brain's going to push back a little bit because it's very uncomfortable, and our brains don't like discomfort. And so it's natural for our brain to be like, well, just go back to what's comfortable, go back to what's familiar. And just because I work with clients a lot on this, when something is uncomfortable, it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. It just means it's new. And so when you start to learn a new skill, it's just like anything where it's going to be uncomfortable and you're going to have to find your groove, right? But the more you do it, just like when you work a muscle, the more uncomfortable you get with it and the less unfamiliar it is. Because the one thing to remember with narcissists is they don't, just like we shouldn't believe what they say, we should believe what they do, right? They can say, oh, I'm going to be better, but then they keep going out and doing the same things. They only believe what we do. So if we say, I have a boundary and I'm not going to XYZ, and then you don't do it, they don't believe what you say. They only believe what you do. So if you don't follow a boundary, you don't, keep that boundary in place, they're going to think that they win and that the boundary doesn't matter. So it's so important that if you say something to a narcissist, like I'm only going to answer your texts on Fridays, or I'm going to hang up if you yell at me. If you do not follow through those boundaries, it does nothing but teach the narcissist that they can be like that little, playground bully that just throws a fit and gets its way.
Very true. So what are some of the benefits or value to setting a boundary, sticking to it, and following through with that when you're working with people?
Well, boundaries teach people how to treat us, right? And boundaries teach us what we should allow in other relationships. And when you start to set boundaries, you start to have more predictability in your life because your life no longer is reliant on, is this person going to act this way? Is this person going to do this? You get to rely on, this is my boundary and this is what I know I can expect. And it starts to put you back into the driver's seat because you're now teaching people how to treat you, not just accepting whatever they're willing to throw your way, right? Because as you said, we overgive, we put ourselves last. A question I love to ask is, if I were to ask you what's on your priority list, what number would you get to until you mentioned yourself? And if you're not on the priority list, at least at number 2, if not number 1, how long until you just give too much of yourself and there's nothing left? And God did not create us for us to be doormats or for us to give until, we're exhausted and sick, and boundaries help us to relegate our resources, time, energy, emotion, whatever, to things that actually deserve our resources, right? So if you, the example that I always think of is like, if somebody calls you, have you ever gotten this text or this phone call, hey, what are you doing? Or what are you doing tomorrow? Or what are you doing whenever?
Mm-hmm.
And you think, oh, I was planning on doing nothing.
Yes.
But then you think, oh, well, nothing. And then they say, great, can you help me? Whatever, blah, blah, blah. And you feel obligated to, because you have the time, you didn't have anything, you didn't have to work, you didn't have any other obligation, you feel somehow obligated to say yes, right? And most people take, especially narcissists, take the path of least resistance. So just because they've asked somebody to do something doesn't mean that person is the best at it or whatever. Doesn't mean the narcissist couldn't do it themselves. Just means that person is easier for the narcissist to go to. So if the person says, okay, yeah, I'll help you, right? I really needed rest. I was really planning to rest tomorrow because I've been, working and taking care of everything and I'm exhausted, and resting tomorrow was really like a 10 out of 10 on my priority list. But since I can say yes, I should say yes. And the narcissist just needed you to do something that was like a 1 of importance to them. So you're trading your 10 of importance for a 1 of importance for the narcissist. And it just doesn't make, the math isn't mathing, right?
And once again, you're putting yourself last.
And teaching the narcissist that you will drop everything and put them as priority.
Right. What their emergency is now. your problem.
And you're sacrificing a value of a 10 out of 10 for you to give them the 1 out of 10 when there's a million other people that they could have asked. Well, with the narcissist, probably not, because they probably have a very small circle, but they could have done it themselves.
Right. And they may have just, trying to get back into your life. But boundaries are good for all types of people. And I think as survivors of narcissistic abuse, anybody dealing with emotional abuse, they lose the ability to have boundaries because they've been so encroached over time, allowing access and their boundaries to be violated. I think it's almost something that as a survivor, you have to relearn and build skills so that you have those boundaries again.
How did you rebuild yours? Do you remember what was something that you really clung to? That was maybe a strong boundary that you learned to set?
Probably the strong boundary that I needed the most that I learned to set was blocking the narcissist from my cell phone so the nasty texts stopped, and letting him only contact me by email. And then I could choose the time where I wanted to see this nasty email. And then it was in writing, and you had something to go back. No, you said you were going to pick up here, and I was going to do this. You were going to do that. And that really helped me because before I chose to do that, my phone was pinging all the time with nasty text messages, and he still had access to me. And so that was that way. But I have also, put that boundary in place with other people as well so that I have, that access. And then, you're on your healing journey and you need to start somewhere. And that was a good start for me. And I was always someone who said yes to too many things, and then I got anxious or upset about it later. And, I'm able to say, oh, I can't this time, but maybe next time. And, it's just skills that you learn along the way. So, you're coming through abuse, you're trying to tape the pieces back, you're held together with duct tape and super glue and Band-Aids. And the last thing you need is to overextend yourself when you need rest. Because you had mentioned before, when you're coming through abuse, you've gotten out of the relationship, but you're exhausted and your body needs to heal. And you do need to take those days where you reset and say, no, today's off, And yeah, we all have those phone conversations where you're like, oh, I'm not doing anything, but you really are.
Yes, you're resting.
And you lose the ability to say no, so that you have to acquire that skill once again.
Yes. And one thing that I really, and I still to this day will do it sometimes, is I will write rest on my calendar.
I like that.
So that way it's a visual representation for me, and it's just like a doctor's appointment or work or anything. It's knowing that spot in my life is already accounted for. And unless it's an emergency, right, that spot is taken. Sorry, I'm not available.
That is a great idea.
Yeah.
I'm going to incorporate that. Then it's not like the day is off. It's not blank, because I love my paper calendar. So,
Cool.
I can do that. That's a very good visual reset day.
Yes.
Yeah. And we all need rest.
Yes.
I'm excited to let you know Chasing Rescue is now an Amazon bestseller. If you've not gotten your copy, you can get it at Amazon, Kindle, or Barnes & Noble.
And I love visuals, and because we're all, we all wake up with a certain amount of energy per day. And I like the idea of using like a cup, like if you picture it, say a coffee cup. And say you wake up and you didn't sleep really well, you had an argument with somebody, or it was a stressful day at work or whatever the day before, your cup might not be completely filled with energy when you wake up, right? But that cup represents how much energy, how much time you have throughout that day to give out to people and other things. And if you pour that cup out and give 99% of it at work or to the narcissist or to whatever, and you only have 1% left for the every other thing that's in your life, that 1% isn't enough, right? So you have to really, it helps me to think of that visual where, okay, I know I only, I didn't sleep well last night, so my cup is only half full this morning. So I have to be really careful and conserving my energy and not giving to someone that, if it's not of an importance over, I like the scale of 1 to 10. If it's not a 6 or greater, I don't give any of my, resources to it. And different days are, sometimes you wake up and your cup is overflowing because you feel amazing and it's great and, it's great things and you just can freely give. But there are other days where you're running on empty. And you had also made a good point about boundaries aren't just necessary with the narcissist. We learn to start using them with everyone because not everybody's a taker, but we still are.
But there are energy vampires out there that just seem to suck the life out of you. And there's nothing wrong with the person, but it's going to take a little extra effort to be around this person. And maybe today is not that day.
Yeah.
And so we all have to, value our time and value ourselves. And that's the whole thing about coming out of narcissistic abuse and being a survivor is you're meeting yourself all over again. Yeah. You're finding out what your needs are and you're saying yes, you're finding your voice, but you're finding your way again. And so it's very important that you tune into what you need and, you get a little selfish because you haven't been that way in so long and attune to what you need, whether it is rest or exercise, or I'm going to eat better today, or I'm going to hydrate, or whatever you need that day, that you get a little selfish and take care of you.
Yes.
And I think that as emotional abuse takes over, you lose yourself. You were so lost. You just don't know how to get that back.
Yes. And I love that you said you're finding your way again. And you don't see the world the same after emotional and narcissistic abuse as you did before. You start to notice red flags. You start to notice the energy vampires. You start to notice the takers. And if we're not careful and we don't pay attention to those things, because our brain is still very much like, oh, that's familiar and predictable. I recognize that. I must be go to that person. You can just fall right back into another situation. And so once you're finding your way again with this new set of eyes, which is, colored, the world becomes colored by the abuse, but the world also becomes colored by the hope that you have for what you want the future pathway to look like, right? You have to be very intentional of what you do give your time, energy, resources, whatever to, because takers love givers. And then something that, is really important to highlight too, where narcissists, we alluded to this in the past, but narcissists choose people who are good. Narcissists choose people who are givers. Narcissists choose people who are empathetic, right? And they choose people who don't have good boundaries or who aren't necessarily strict with their boundaries because takers will take. And if you want to give somebody the benefit of the doubt or I just want to, help them and let them see that I'm a good person, they will completely capitalize on that. And if you're not really intentional with your boundaries, habits will repeat, right? And so being intentional with your boundaries, again, is not to punish anyone. You're not saying, no, I think you're a jerk, I don't want to be with you, to a friend, right? Unless that friend is a narcissist. But, you're saying, no, I can't. I'm not available, right? It doesn't have to be I'm not available because I already said I wanted to take a nap, or I'm not available because I want to hang out with somebody else. No, I'm not available. Thanks for asking.
And no, you don't have to explain.
Mm-hmm.
There's no justification. There's no over-explaining. And I think you're so right. As the rose-colored glasses come off and you're seeing your new reality and how your life is going to look, you have to be very intentional in how you're going to live and how your calendar is going to go and how your time's going to go. And you're so happy and relaxed that you have this new life that you still have to protect it because, like you said, most survivors are very much givers, and that's why they got taken advantage of in the first place.
Yes. Because for whatever reason, narcissists know how to go into the room and they've perfected their craft the older they get. So, and here's another tip too, narcissists don't get better as they get older, they get worse. And so, they've perfected their craft to where they know, just like when you learn the narcissist playbook, you can learn what signs to look for that somebody is toxic and, has the potential to be abusive and is a narcissist. They also know the signs to look for in good people who have a good friend base, people who have a good family, people who are just good, people who are givers and empathetic and helpers and kind and doers, right? They are drawn to those people because they know they can benefit from it, right? And then ultimately they end up, trying to take all that away from them. But boundaries are just for anybody in your life to where it's going to teach people what you expect and how you expect for them to treat you. And most people narcissists excluded usually, will live up or down to the expectations we set. So if we set low expectations, that's what we're going to get. But if we set high expectations, most people really do respect that and will be treated accordingly.
And I like that you always say we teach people how to treat us. I think that's so important because, what you tolerate, you allow.
Absolutely.
And those are just, lessons you have to learn wherever you are along your journey.
Yes. Yes. And, the journey isn't, again, I love analogies and movie quotes, ironically, but the analogy I always think of, so on a journey for healing from narcissism, any kind of emotional abuse, so many people, I feel like they get, and this is true with any journey, like weight loss, giving up a substance, anything like that, health journey, when they have a moment of weakness or relapse, they feel like, oh my gosh, everything that I've been working for is I just ruined it. And I really want you to think of it as a cross-country road trip where you start in New York and your goal is California. And you get in the car in New York, filled up with gas, you did all the preparation, right? Tires have air in it, gas is full, all the things, and fresh oil change, that kind of thing. And you get going. Well, then you get to Nebraska and you have a flat tire. When you have a flat tire, do you think, my road trip is ruined, I have to go back and start over in New York? No, right? Like you've made progress. You're in Nebraska, right? All of that progress is not for naught, right?
Give yourself credit.
Give yourself credit for how far you've come. Is it a pain in the butt that you've had a flat tire and you have to, fill out the road or whatever? Yeah. It's annoying. Sure, fine. It happens, right? You don't go back to New York and say, I'm starting over from zero. You start where you fix the tire in Nebraska and keep going, right? And so it's not all for nothing. The progress you make, you get to keep.
And that's a wonderful point. That's going back to the boundaries. It's a progress. So if you set a boundary and you totally blow it, you keep going.
Yes.
You keep going.
Yes.
And you learn from each time you move the goalpost. Because with a narcissist, the goalposts have been moved so many times, you're living a life of confusion. I mean, right when you think you get to where you're going, they move the goalpost. But with a boundary, you set it, and we all mess up. And we all fall down. And it's not how you fall down, it's that you get back up.
Yeah. And I don't know who said this, but I heard this one time where when we have kids and they're just learning to walk and they get up and they kind of wobble around and they stumble and they fall, do we say, well, you better give up? You couldn't do it, right? No, we encourage them, right? And that's really encouraging, I think, for us to be that kind of encouraging friend and support network for people where we see that, oh my gosh, they tried and they got up and they stumbled a little bit, but they're getting up again. And we're going to encourage them, right? To be like, yes, keep going. That was great. That was a great attempt, right? And, we're going to mess up on our boundaries. We're going to have bad days. We're all human and, fallible. And that's okay. You're learning. You're still taking one more step closer on your road trip to California, right? Nothing is wasted.
I think that's so important. The takeaway is keep going, keep going.
For more information on surviving narcissistic abuse,
like, share, comment, subscribe,
so you can continue to get the support you need on your healing journey.